It's our basketball preview show, so we're going to be breaking down all the conferences on this edition of Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to Incompetent Sports Talk, along with Mike Rabon and Jordan Loperena. I'm Alex Solsma, and a little change of pace this week because we're going to be talking a little basketball. This is our basketball preview show, so we're going to go conference by conference, looking at the major conferences and picking our winners. And then we'll also look at some of the mid-majors, too, toward the end of the show. And we're going to start off right away in the Big 12, and we're going to give you our picks for who we think will win the Big 12 conference. I'll start with mine first. I think it's the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas, coming off a good year last year, they got all 5 starters back from last year, and to me, the 2 cornerstones of this team, Sherron Collins and Cole Aldridge. You look at Cole Aldridge, he's 6'11", 245 pounds, averaged 15 points, 11 rebounds last year. Could have gone to the NBA probably, but he decided to come back to Kansas for another year. And then you look at Sherron Collins, also a great contributor to that team. And really, Bill Self always has quality teams at Kansas. And I think this is a team that really is going to be contention for the national title. You know, they're 14 and 2, excuse me, in the Big 10 in the Big 12 last year. Can't get my numbers right, but Mike, do you think it's Kansas?
I think it is Kansas. I think Texas will give them a run. Texas is hurt a little bit. Veras Ward, one of their quality new point guards, is out for the season with an injury, and I think if he would be playing, they could compete, but I think in the end, Kansas has too much depth. I had the privilege to see Cole Aldridge play a couple times in high school. He's from the Twin Cities area, and it's amazing how he's progressed in terms of being able to move up and down the court, be agile, and actually, you know, run up and down the court. In high school, he was slow, he'd walk up and down, but you can see what Bill Self and that coaching staff has done with him, and I think Kansas is in prime position to make another Final Four run this season.
And Aldridge has to be one of my favorite players in college basketball, and you also take a look at this Kansas team. It seems like their top 8 or 9 players could almost start in any Big 12 team, with maybe the exception of Texas. Jordan, Texas, Kansas, who do you like?
Well, there's not much left for me to say because my pick is Kansas. I believe the Jayhawks and Bill Self, one of the most well-coached teams in the country. In Aldridge and Collins, not only do they bring talent, but they bring back a lot of leadership to this team, which, you know, it'll help them get through a long season, but it'll be extremely helpful to get through the tournament. You see that all the time. Some of the times these teams that, you know, they grind it out all year and they get to the tournament in advance just because they have the leadership. They've all been there before. You know, you're not going to see, you know, Kansas being the type of team that just breezes through the regular season and then, you know, loses early, because that'll happen to some teams too. Not so much with this Jayhawks team. They'll get there. They'll win the Big 12.
And if you look at teams that consistently have been going to the Final Four, especially over the last decade, is teams that have quality point guard play and quality play underneath the rim, getting rebounds. You look at Carolina last year with Tywan Lawson and Tyler Hansbrough. We've got a similar thing going on with Cole Aldridge and Sherron Collins. So they're set up for success, and we've seen that in the past.
And Kansas has no real significant losses, it seems like, from that team last year. And now to the ACC, and my pick is a team that has a lot of significant losses. It's North Carolina Tar Heels. They lost probably their top 4 best players, or top 4 leading scorers from last season. You got to replace a guy like Ty Hansbrough, which is a very tough task to do. But I think they'll get it done in the ACC this year. You take a look at what they've already done this year. They've beat Michigan State. They've beaten Ohio State. They've lost to 2 quality opponents that are ranked in the top 25 already. And I think Marcus Ginyard, I think he's going to be a big part of this team because the guy plays good defense. He missed a lot of the season last year, but I really think he's going to be the leader of this team. And I know, Mike, I know you love North Carolina, so I won't try to steal all your thunder here, but I also want to mention the fact that North Carolina has 5 guys that are 6'10" or taller. That could be big too, Mike.
I think Roy Williams, you have to give him so much credit for his ability to bring in this recruiting classes year after year, the talent and the depth. Even though, as you said, North Carolina loses significant players, they're still probably the deepest team in the ACC and maybe the deepest team in the country. John Henson, a big 6'10" forward that you were talking about, the Ware twins out of Mater Dei in California, and then you got Dexter Strickland and Leslie McDonald, 2 guards coming in. I mean, they're just loaded with talent. And then next year, of course, you know, they're bringing in Harrison Barnes. North Carolina does a great job recruiting, and again this year, you know, they've lost some tough games already, but they've beat some tough teams too. We're only going to see this team progress throughout the season, and the ACC is a little down this year. So even though UNC loses that talent, I think they're going to win the ACC title this year.
I think North Carolina wins. You mentioned Ginyard. He's going to be huge this season for the Tar Heels. You look at what they've done so far. They beat a Michigan State team with probably more experience and leadership out there on the court. And that intangible wasn't much of a factor even in that game. North Carolina just had the talent. We've already seen Duke slip up to a Wisconsin team. That's not a bad Wisconsin team, but Duke definitely the more talented team between those two. And so, I maybe was thinking Duke on the, shoulders of Kyle Singler, but not so much. The Tar Heels are going to continue to own, and Mike will have an enjoyable college basketball season in the ACC.
I think Duke is very sound with regard to the perimeter and guard play. Shire, Smith, Singler are all great, but they don't have that inside presence. They don't have the Luol Dings and the Elton Brands and the Shane Battiers of the past. So that's why I think Carolina in the end with Deion Thompson and Ed Davis will be able to get it done over Duke.
ACC should be another deep conference. I mean, who do you see competing with North Carolina? We mentioned Duke. Does a team like Georgia Tech rise up this year?
I think you got to look at Maryland bringing Grievous Vasquez back, too. They should at least be competitive. They had some impressive wins last year.
I'm not impressed with the way Maryland's played so far this year. They've had a lot of losses, and it seems like whenever they've had that big game, especially in those preseason tournaments, they've lost a few games already.
Maryland lacks what Duke lacks, the inside depth. They've got Eric Hayes and they've got Grievous Vasquez, two very good guards, guys who can shoot the ball from anywhere, but they don't have the inside depth in the end to really make a run in an ACC title. I think Georgia Tech's very good. They've got Shumpter and Gandhi Lawal. They've got a lot of talent. I think Paul Hewitt, this could be his year to really make a run. And they've won some good games already this year. Clemson, they're just so inconsistent. They've got talent with Booker. They're a good basketball team, but in the end, I just don't think they're disciplined enough to beat the Heels and Duke.
And Maryland's really going to need, in my opinion, a strong ACC season, because last year their ACC season was pretty average, but it was really the quality wins out of conference that got them into the NCAA tournament. Then even won them a game in the NCAA tournament. But really now I don't know about this year, but I agree with you guys on Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech, Paul Hewitt does it again, and a team just loaded with young talent. But for me, I know it's hard to say this speculating right now, but I think this is the year Paul Hewitt has to go back to the NCAA tournament. I think if he wants to keep his job, frankly, because this team finished really near the bottom of the ACC last year, and now they come back again this year. A team loaded with talent. I think he's got to get it done. And on the topic of coaches in the hot seat in the ACC, Sidney Lowe really has to get it done this year. This is an NC State team that has just really finished below expectations every year. I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, for me, growing up in that area, I mean, NC State, they struggle because look at who they have to go against in the state when it comes to recruiting. They get decent players, but it's tough to beat Duke and Carolina and Wake every year, and then the ACC is so close together. I mean, that recruiting pool, even against the SEC, I mean, it's very difficult for NC State.
Let's stay out east now and go to the Big East Conference. And Jordan, this is a conference that was really good last year, might lack a little bit the depth that we saw last year, but who do you got in this one?
They might be lacking depth, but they will still have one of the nation's top teams in Villanova. I know you're a big Jay Wright fan, and you look at what that team did in the tournament last year. I expect the same type of performance out of them all year long. They brought back Scotty Reynolds, which he's easily one of the best players in the country, proven to be one of the best tournament players in the country. And they just really, you mentioned the Big East, not quite where it was last year. Maybe Villanova a little less battle-tested, but maybe less worn out physically by the time they get to the tournament this year. I think Villanova takes it.
Mike?
I think Villanova is clearly the best team. They're one of the few teams in the country that can win strictly with guard play. They don't have to have that big man underneath that can get it done. Last year they had Cunningham. He did a great job. But Jay Wright does a great job getting that team ready. And Scotty Reynolds, obviously the emotional leader, the team leader, making that shot against Pitt to go to the Final Four. I think Villanova is clearly the front runner. I think you got to look out for Syracuse even. I know they had their little mishap against Lemoyne, and everybody got on them a little bit, but they're 8-0. They beat North Carolina by 16 points. This Syracuse team is a team to be reckoned with, and down the line I think they'll get it done. I think you could throw other teams in there. Georgetown, they're a good team as well, but I think in the end Villanova and Syracuse are going to be the two best teams in that conference.